Alright guys, these are your notes for 3.4. So we're going to start by talking about metabolic pathways. These are the series of chemical reactions that are either going to build up complex molecules or break down complex molecules. We do have two types of metabolic pathways. There is the catabolic and anabolic pathway. Now, this does connect to enzymes. So when we looked at enzymes, remember we looked at how enzymes can help to speed up or speed up the building of our molecules or breaking down of our molecules. So now that we've looked at how enzymes can go in and impact that, we're going to look at the actual processes that are happening. All right, so the two types of metabolic pathways that we have are catabolic and anabolic. Okay, so when we are looking at our catabolic, these are going to be pathways that are releasing energy when they break down complex molecules into simpler compounds. And so I really want y'all, like, one way to remember cat. I know that with cations, a lot of y'all have learned like cats break down things. So catabolic pathway is breaking down something. Anabolic, these are the pathways that are doing the opposite. They are going to consume energy in order to build those complicated molecules from simpler compounds. All right, so as you see over here, when we take our molecules and we add energy to it, that's our anabolic pathway. Okay, we're taking simpler compounds and we're adding energy in order to build them together to make those bonds. And now if we went the other way, if we took those bonds and we broke those bonds and we basically broke down that complex molecule, that's catabolic. All right, so those are our two types of our pathways. Now let's talk about energy. So we know that all organisms are going to need energy, and energy is the ability to do work. Okay, so we've been looking at energy a lot within the cell, but it is important for us to also look at the bigger picture and understand that all organisms are going to need energy to survive and function. Okay, so it's not going to be just looking at our cells alone, but we need to understand that this is essential to all organisms in order for them to survive and function. So if we see a loss in energy flow, it is going to result in death. So I'm going to look at some of the other key vocabulary that I want you guys to remember when we're looking at energy, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of this you guys have already learned, and so I just wanted to have that on here just so that we can refresh it. So kinetic energy is the energy that's associated with motion. Now within kinetic energy, the one that we are going to see and refer to most commonly is going to be thermal energy, which is the energy associated with specifically the movement of atoms or molecules. All right, so we already know kinetic and thermal, and I just want y'all to kind of rewrite them out in your notes so that this is something that you are going to refresh yourself on so that you can remember it for this topic. The other type that you guys already know as well is potential energy, which you know is your stored energy. And within potential energy, I want you guys to understand chemical energy is going to be the potential energy that we have available for release in a chemical reaction. The next thing we're going to look at our two law of thermodynamics. So, quick refresher, law of thermodynamics. So, the word thermodynamics, this is going to be the study of energy transformations in matter. Okay, so anytime we're referring to thermodynamics, we're just looking at the energy transformations within matter. So it's important for us to remember that these laws that we're going to look at, they are going to apply to the universe as a whole. Okay, and I know that you guys have kind of looked at these laws already, but we're just going to write them out so that we can have them fresh in our minds when we look at the rest of the unit. So, the first law of thermodynamics, energy cannot be created or destroyed. And the second part of this is that energy, while it can't be created or destroyed, it can be transferred or transformed. So, for example, if I had potential energy stored in food, or if I looked at an example of seeds that a bird is going to eat, the chemical potential energy stored in the seeds is going to be transferred into kinetic energy for that bird to later move around or fly. Second law, we know that energy transformations will increase the entropy of the universe, and the entropy means disorder. So, during energy transfers or transformations, we need to remember that there is going to be some energy that becomes unusable and is often lost as heat. So, for example, the bird that ate the seeds, as the bird is flying, there is going to be some energy that the bird is going to give off as heat, and that's the energy that's just lost. All right, free energy. So we know that the laws of thermodynamics apply to the universe as a whole. So scientists use this concept called free energy in order to help them determine the likelihood of specific reactions to happen in organisms. So basically this is used to determine like if a reaction is going to be favorable energetically. Like, are we going to get energy from this reaction, or is that reaction is going to end up costing us energy? the formula for this, we're going to look at the change in free energy. It's going to equal the change in total energy minus the absolute temperature times the change in entropy. Okay, so when we see a change in total energy, we're going to take away the temperature times the amount of disorder that was caused, and that tells us the overall change in free energy. Okay, so think about what we're doing in that formula as well. All right, continuing on, I want us to remember that when we look at free energy, that total that we get for the free energy, that's going to tell us whether or not that reaction is going to happen spontaneously. Meaning, is this reaction going to happen without anything being put in, without any outside input or any outside energy required? Can that reaction happen all on its own? Okay, so based on the free energy changes, we can then classify reactions as either exergonic or endergonic. All right, so that means that reactions fall into two categories. Either those reactions are able to happen spontaneously without any outside energy going in, or they can't happen spontaneously and they're going to need some outside energy put in. So that's those two categories that are exergonic or endergonic. And we're going to look at those two a little closer in a minute. So our exergonic reactions, these are reactions that are going to release energy. So think of that exer in the word and think exit. So energy will be exiting. We are releasing energy. So in these reactions, we will see that the energy of our reactants is going to be higher than the energy of our products. All right, so the amount of free energy that we have is going to be less than zero. All right, so we do not need any energy put in. This is the type of reaction that actually releases energy to us. So, an example of this is cellular respiration. The other type that we have is endergonic. So endure, think enter. These are reactions that need energy to enter. Reactions that are going to absorb energy. So our energy for our products is going to be higher than the energy of the reactants. So that change in free energy will be greater than zero. We are absorbing free energy, and so an example of this is photosynthesis, how the plants will take in energy from the sun. Okay, so this is absorbing energy, so energy is coming in. Let's talk about cells and energy. So you need to understand that our cells are not at equilibrium. All right, so that's one of the most important concepts that you really need to grasp for topic 3.4 is that we are not at equilibrium. And the reason we are not at equilibrium, it has to do with the fact that living cells will have a constant flow of materials going in and out of that membrane. And because it's a constant flow, at any one point in time, we will not see an equilibrium. All right, so our cells are going to have three kinds of functions that they're going to be doing. All right, so the three types, and you might already remember these, but we're just going to jot them down real quick so that this can be something for you to look at and revise. Our three types are mechanical, transport, and chemical. So your mechanical functions, these are the functions related to movement. So for example, the movement of the chromosomes within the cell, the movement of the cilia to move the cell, or even the movement for the contraction of muscle cells. Second would be transport. So the transport functions, these would be things like pumping substances across the membrane against the flow. So think of active transport, right? We were having to move things using energy. The last type is your chemical. So this is the synthesis of molecules. So this, for example, when your cells build polymers from monomers, right? So when the monomers are put together to make your polymers, that's an example of a chemical function done by the cell. All right, ATP. So we've looked at this on our activity. We know that ATP consists of our adenine, our ribose, and our three phosphate groups, and that's where that T is coming in. It is called adenosine triphosphate. Okay, that tri represents the three phosphate groups. Now, ATP, these are our molecules that our organisms are going to be using as a source of energy in order to perform work. So molecules are, as ATP is used by organisms as a source of energy in order for them to perform their functions. Okay, so we looked at the structure for ATP. You should also be familiar with this from when you learned about your biomolecules. All right, so we've also looked at ADP and how ADP can then be regenerated into ATP. And this is done through the ATP cycle. So the ATP cycle, we've looked at the transformation of ATP into ADP. And so the cycle is really just that transformation of ATP going to ADP and ADP turning into ATP. So you know that ATP, in order for it to turn into ADP, we have to add a water molecule, so H2O, and it removes a phosphate and releases energy. Going back from ADP to ATP is where we have to add energy in, and we also have to add in a phosphate to turn it from that diphosphate into a triphosphate. So this process right here is our ATP cycle, and it's that constant way for the cells to go in and store energy. So when the ADP is turning into ATP, that's the energy being stored in that molecule so that the cell has a way to access the energy from the ATP anytime that it needs it, right? So you do have to know that ADP is constantly recombining with phosphate groups to form new ATP molecules, so those molecules are there for the cell when it's in need of energy. Now, when we are going from ATP into ADP, this is a way for our cell to release that stored energy. Okay, so the energy comes from the hydrolysis. All right, so it's the breaking of that bond between the second and third phosphate group by the H2O molecule. All right, and remember that was the process hydrolysis, and we've looked at hydrolysis back when we did unit 1 as well. All right. Last thing you need to know is that this ATP cycle is coupling both the exergonic and endergonic processes that we looked at a little earlier, because we have the ATP going to ADP where we're releasing energy, and then ADP going to ATP where we are adding energy. All right, so both of these processes are being used to power all cellular work.